Authoritarianism, Psychological Contradictions, and States of Exception. So, last Saturday I wrote a piece, and you can find links for all these down below, marveling that the new Democratic vice presidential candidate is extolling the virtues of minding your own business when the whole progressive plan for human life is to have the state micromanaging all of your affairs, which ain't exactly coincident with minding your own business. And how in the world can anyone believe he means what he is saying? Just in case you thought it might be a one-off, he was still at it yesterday. He was saying that J.D. Vance should mind his own business as regards healthcare decisions. Indeed, when they find a line people seem to like, or which they have decided people will be compelled to like, they are apt to repeat it 5,000 times. And from the very top, and just a few hours ago, the party of vaccine mandates would like you to know that women should be trusted to make their own healthcare decisions. Here from Vice President Harris. Again, this stuff wouldn't survive 5 seconds under an intelligent and adversarial press. With the leaders on top, I know you can easily just say they're lying. I'm less interested in the fact that politicians lie, and more interested in the fact that many of the common folk seem to believe their lies, and in fact actually believe we stand for freedom when every political action they cheer has as its goal the destruction of freedom. See, that sort of contradiction would bother me. As explanation for that, though, a couple of articles and thoughts were passed my way, and I thought I would pass them on to you. So the first here, we could put under the title, Left Authoritarians Don't Know They're Authoritarians. So the first is a nice piece by Grove City College professor of psychology Luke Conway titled, The Left Has an Authoritarian Problem But Doesn't Know It. And again, you can find the link down below. If I may briefly summarize his argument, it goes as follows. So first of all, let us not mistake obedience for authoritarianism. Although there are dangers of excess on every side, in general a populace that seeks to obey leadership is a good thing. Nations fall apart rather quickly when that goes away. True citizen authoritarians don't just want people to obey rules, they go further. They want a leader who will hurt the people they don't like and require submission to group norms, which often the populace disagrees with. In fact, they'd happily see laws broken to get those things. And then 2, authoritarian leaders are everywhere in every political movement and just about every societal cause. It is not news to notice there are would-be authoritarian leaders about. They are always about. The question is, has a cultural position developed that will get people to promote and obey them? Without that, they're nothing. With that, well, you have authoritarianism. And 3, and finally, on that note, there are people who desire authoritarian leadership on both the right and the left, but the authoritarians on the right know they are authoritarians, and the authoritarians on the left are in heavy denial about it. This has been tested by giving people surveys filled with questions like, should a society strongly punish those it disagrees with? And then asking them at the end of the survey if they think of themselves as authoritarian. Well, and then to quote the article, this isn't mere speculation. Our scientific data demonstrates this very clearly. In a national survey of over 5,000 Americans, we gave people a standard authoritarianism questionnaire, and then afterwards asked them a simple question, do you view yourself as a dogmatic and authoritarian person? Conservative Americans who scored high on the authoritarianism questionnaire had no problem saying, yes, I am authoritarian, but liberals were a different thing entirely. Not only were liberal authoritarians less likely than conservatives to accurately identify themselves as authoritarians, when they were, in fact, authoritarian, but there's actually a negative correlation between left-wing authoritarianism, the reality, and liberals' willingness to identify as authoritarian, their own perception. This means that the more authoritarian liberals are, the less they believe they are authoritarian. As he says, this is dangerous because if your movement recognizes that problem X is a temptation of the movement, you will be on guard against it. If you deny it as a problem, it can reach its full flowering and nobody will stop it. So to quote him again, he said, every party has potential authoritarians, but a party that denies the problem also won't address the problem. Right now, that party is the Democratic Party. We've tacitly raised a generation of liberals who think it's normal for Disney to fire actress Gina Carano for having a political opinion that some people don't like, and yet also think they are not authoritarian for doing so. So that is interesting data anyway, to say, no, it isn't just your imagination. The left really does have this blind spot. Alas, there is not much information in the article, not as much as I'd like, on why this is a particular problem of the left, except a brief argument, which I might summarize as follows. So, 1, this sort of psychological contradiction is actually not uncommon on left or right. For example, we seek to limit freedoms in the name of freedom, or we exhibit collectivism in the name of individualism. 2, these contradictions arise when group norms go against individual motivational goals. The conservative group norm is to desire freedom, but we sometimes may have individual reasons for restricting freedom. If we do, we will be tempted to recast those decisions as actually freedom-loving to be more in line with the group. Although, to be frank, It seems to me we don't do this nearly as often. I mean, you can tell me that I'm actually the person who is blind if you'd like. But for example, the Roman Catholic integralists who want a new monarch to smite their enemies will tell you they want a new monarch to smite their enemies. But perhaps they have different group norms now. And then 3, finally, similarly, liberals believe they have anyway, according to this article, a group norm that opposes authoritarianism. But, he says, quote, often their individual members have motives toward authoritarianism, and the net result is that liberals have a motivational blind spot for believing that their own authoritarian behaviors are authoritarian. They simply don't want to believe it, end quote. Just a note here, he calls them liberals. I otherwise probably would not, because there's just very little left that is liberal about them, and maybe that language actually does express a weakness in his own understanding of their motivations too. But anyway, those are some thoughts on the topic for you. And then secondly, we could put this heading under the state of exception. On a related note, you may remember that during COVID there was a lot of talk about states of exception. Thinkers like Giorgio Agamben would talk about how our nations now live in a permanent state of exception. So nominally, we are liberal democratic republics with constrained governments. In reality, we just declare an emergency, or some other proclamation of exception, and then we can ignore normal restraints and procedures and do whatever we want. This was obviously super prominent during COVID, but actually it happens all the time. That same sort of thing seems to operate on an individual level. So conversing these last few days with a couple people who were defending Waltz's comments, it seemed to me that their position was essentially, 1, I believe in freedom for everyone and in minding your own business, and then 2, unless doing so would threaten the common good. Now, maybe literally all of us would actually affirm both of those. The problem here is that their list of unless is 78 million pages long, and so has utterly obliterated any practical sense in which they actually believe in freedom. But, and we can point back to psychological contradictions here, and I've had these conversations with them, they are totally clueless about it. It's not their fault that in our complex societies, their except for list is of necessity 78 million pages long. By golly, they believe in freedom. Many times now, I've remarked on the people who walk directly from the My Body, My Choice rally to the Vaccine Mandates Now rally without their brain apparently ever signaling that any contradiction has occurred there. Well, I've had many conversations with these folks via social media, and they have told me many times now that they are passionate defenders of bodily autonomy, unless that bodily autonomy might threaten someone else. Abortion, fortunately, does not threaten anyone else, at least this is the ridiculous claim they make. What does? Well, I mean, basically everything else you do in life does, I'm afraid. Even drinking that Dr. Pepper. It's bad for you. It's going to raise healthcare costs for everyone later when we have to care for you. So, of course, we have to restrict the consumption of soda, too, for the common good. Oh, also that plastic straw you're using to drink it is too dangerous. But I believe in freedom, man. I believe it. So we reach the point where they're saying, we believe a woman has a right to make her own healthcare decisions, and they're talking about abortion. They are literally not talking about anything except abortion. But they actually believe within themselves that they are great defenders of individual choice.